Leading up to the 1890s, Japan was a relatively modern nation, as it had heavily industrialized during the Meiji era. However, it entered the modern world at a time where technology was advancing rapidly, and Japan could not necessarily keep up with this pace of development as other nations could. When it came to developing its navy, Japan had focused on Great Britain in particular because, like Japan, Britain was an island. As far as the Japanese were concerned, this similarity between the two nations helped solidify the idea that the navies should be developed on similar philosophies, though given time, the two navies would begin to develop down two different paths. With the launch of HMS Dreadnought in 1906, a new battleship era began, and Japan did respond by laying down the keels to Kawachi and Setsu, which were decent attempts at making a Dreadnought battleship, but were definitely far from ideal. Dreadnought would be followed up by Invincible a couple years later, and Japan would take an interest in the battlecruiser type. Now, Japan had a similar idea to the battlecruiser in the Tsukuba and Kurama classes, where they took an armored cruiser and put battleship guns on top of it. However, these ships did lack speed, as they were still to form in line with a standard pre-Dreadnought battleship and armored cruiser. As 1910 was approaching, Japan wanted to begin developing its own warships within its own borders and construct all of the ships in their own yards. And they decided to have one final Hail Mary in constructing a major warship abroad. In previous projects, Japan had sent a few designers to Britain to work on projects to learn about different technologies and advances happening in shipyards and ship construction. For this project, Japan was going to demand more control of the project, and they would send more than 100 people to Britain to keep track of the project in the form of designers, engineers, and shipbuilders. Japan looked into 4 shipyards for the new project to take place in. These would be the Vickers Yard, Armstrong Yard, Whitworth Yard, and Ellswick Yard. Japan opted to go with Vickers because Mikasa had come from Vickers and it was considered a superior build to what the other shipyards had completed in the past, and the most recent British battlecruiser had been ordered from Vickers, which would end up becoming HMS Princess Royal. The Vice Chief of the Naval General Staff, Vice Admiral Fuji, had a personal preference for the battlecruiser when compared to the battleship, and he would argue for its superiority in front of the Naval General Staff, which would eventually see Japan order a battlecruiser from Vickers rather than a battleship. The contract with Vickers was signed on the 17th of October, 1910. It called for a short preparation phase, and upon the completion of all plans regarding the hull design, guns, engines, and armor, these plans were to be sent to Japan so 3 sister ships could be built within Japanese yards. While Japan was invested in creating a design that surpassed all previous British battlecruisers, the primary goal of this project was to ensure that Japan could build its own major warships within its own yards. The design team at Vickers would make up the basic draft for the new battlecruiser, and it was essentially an improved variation of HMS Lion. However, the Naval General Staff's insistence that Japanese designers have more control of this project meant that there were some serious alterations made to the design to fit Japanese philosophy and operations. Initial designs had called for a vessel of roughly 19,000 tons, capable of making 25 knots maximum, and it would have an armament of anywhere from 8 to 10 12-inch guns in the British, American, and German capital ship arrangements. Ultimately, the Japanese stuck with the same gunnery arrangement that was used aboard Lion and Princess Royal, with 2 superfiring turrets forward, 1 turret amidships, a large gap, and then a 4th turret. Because of the arrangement of the machinery spaces aboard Lion, there was a bit of superstructure with the funnel between turrets 3 and 4. The Japanese rearranged the machinery for the new ships, and this would eliminate the funnel between 3 and 4. This would ideally give the new ship a better field of fire with turret 3 off the stern. The hull design, especially around the bow and stern, were largely based off the Tsukuba, though on a much greater scale, so this hull was effectively a domestic Japanese design that the British would never use. For the main armament, the Japanese did want to outdo most foreign contemporaries, and so they selected 8 12-inch 50 caliber guns, though this would come into question within the upcoming months. Due to Japan's close relationship with Great Britain at this time period, Japan had an early leak that Britain was indeed upgunning to the 13.5-inch gun for the new battlecruisers of the Lion class, and the British themselves were awaiting gunnery test at a firing range, which the Japanese were invited to attend. Prior to these firing tests taking place, Japanese designers had access to the statistics of the 13.5-inch gun, and upon comparing them to the 12-inch 50 caliber gun selected for the Kongos, it was clear that the 13.5-inch gun was superior in every regard. A request was sent to the Naval General Staff insisting that the new battlecruisers should be upgunned to no less than 14-inch weapons. However, the Naval General Staff responded, stating that they needed live firing results for a 14-inch gun before they would dedicate themselves to installing them on the new ship. The Japanese would order the production of one 14-inch gun for trials at their own expense. Vickers did not own a firing range capable of housing the 14-inch gun, so when the test weapon was completed, it was sent to the Royal Navy's firing range at Shoeburyness, where it would be test-fired on the 8th of March, 1911. The results obtained from the live firing test were compared to the 12-inch 50 caliber gun intended to be installed, and the superiority of the 14-inch gun was solid. The shells were capable of penetrating more armor and would do more damage upon a penetration. They were more accurate, they had a similar rate of fire, and, most importantly, the 14-inch gun had a longer life expectancy. So it was decided on the 29th of November, 1911, that the new ships should indeed carry 8 14-inch guns. There was a slight issue with this decision having been made so late in the year, and it's the fact that 2 of the ships had already begun construction. The first vessel, Kongō, was laid down on the 17th of January 1911, and the second vessel, Hiei, was laid down on the 4th of November 1911, just 3 weeks before the decision to upgrade the guns was made. The ammunition storage and handling spaces needed to be redesigned, the turrets needed to be redesigned, and the hull needed to be strengthened in order to withstand the increased pressure of the gun's blast. Luckily for the Japanese, these alterations could be made just in time without having to alter any of the work that had already been completed. This in turn meant that there were no delays in construction as a result of these alterations. Speaking of the construction, this was the most important phase of the project, as the ultimate goal was to study the construction of the warship. Members from Japan's design teams and shipyards, whom were due to be promoted within the upcoming years, were sent to Britain to oversee the construction of the ship. A series of private shipyards had also sent members over to investigate the construction of the ship so that they could improve their own facilities and assist the Imperial Japanese Navy in the future. Along with investigating the construction of the ship itself, materials that were used were also looked into, such as gantry cranes, berths, and launching technology. Upon the return of members from the Kawasaki and Mitsubishi yards in early 1912, the Japanese Navy simultaneously ordered 2 more vessels from both of these yards in order to prove that the efforts being made during this project were paying off, and that Japan could order multiple major ships at one time, and they could be built simultaneously. As a result, Kawasaki would lay down the 3rd keel on the 16th of March, 1912. This would eventually become Haruna, and Mitsubishi would follow up 1 day later by laying the keel down to the 4th ship that would eventually become Kirashima. Kongō was completed on the 16th of August, 1913, Hiei on the 4th of August, 1914, and Haruna and Kirashima were both completed on the 19th of April, 1915. The project was a resounding success. Japan found itself in possession of 4 brand new warships that were unmatched in the Pacific, and they had also modernized their shipyards to undergo even greater projects in the upcoming years. Even though Japan had thrown itself into the concept of the battlecruiser for this project, it would not stick for long, and the next project would resort back to a battleship design. However, that is a story for another day. So, if you've learned something new in this video, why not leave a like and a comment down below, and have a wonderful day.